Okay, so I'm Scott Price. I am the Policy Director for the Alliance for a Progressive Virginia. APV is celebrating our 10th year in existence in 2020. And we are on our inaugural flagship podcast that I've sort of in-home forced quarantine podcast. And we are very happy that you're here, and we're happy that you're watching. I have three people to talk to today, and each of them are activists and volunteers and work in various, pardon me, various fields around the country. And I thought we would talk a little about the impact on activism and volunteerism and on politics of the coronavirus and the upcoming election and so on and so forth. I'm going to start, we'll do a series of introductions real quick. Celeste, would you like to introduce yourself?
No.
Okay, we'll move on then.
Hi, I'm Celeste Land, and I've known Scott for years, and I'm a professional volunteer and a professional troublemaker, not necessarily in that order. I volunteer with a lot of different nonprofits, large and small, and in recent years, for some strange reason, I've been volunteering with a couple of indivisible groups in my community in Northern Virginia, with the Democrats in my community, and also with the League of Women Voters in my community. So I've gotten a lot of different perspectives from that. And also, I also do a lot of work with grant makers. So I'm familiar with what the funders are looking at when they're funding grassroots advocacy and progressive causes, and what they're looking for and what they're not looking for.
Excellent. Adam?
Hi, I'm Adam Trimmer. I am the Virginia ambassador for Born Perfect, the campaign to end conversion therapy. I myself am a conversion therapy survivor, and I've told my personal story in a couple different channels. I've shared my experiences in advocacy settings with legislative hearings. I've been speaking at some of the boards in Virginia. So the agency is called the Department of Health Professions, and the individual boards are the boards of psychology, counseling, social work, medicine, and nursing. I was featured on a GLAAD award-winning special called Conversion Therapy God Only Knows that was done by CBS Sunday Morning. And I volunteer at an LGBT this summer for youth. And during the day, I work in a call center in the financial institution world, which, as you can imagine right now, is a really difficult place to be right now, just because we're hearing from people who are impacted through loss of jobs, through loss of income, and it's definitely challenging, but we keep moving forward. And I live in Prince George, Virginia, right close to Richmond. It's about a little bit less than an hour south of Richmond. I used to live in Richmond for a little bit.
Excellent.
And in Virginia, sorry. I was going to say, in Virginia, we actually just became the 20th state to end conversion therapy for minors.
Yay!
Something I think we're very proud of. Very proud of.
Yes.
Beth?
So I'm Beth Wiegard. I live in Parkland, Florida. I've been active in gun violence prevention through Mom's Demand, which is a local and national grassroots advocacy group. We do an advocacy day at the state legislature in Tallahassee every year, which is a tremendous opportunity to see our fellow activists, and it's also an exercise in frustration because we have a very red legislature, and they don't really want to move the ball, but we keep trying. Also, my daughter, Emma Gonzalez, was one of the founders of March for Our Lives, so I've also seen the advocacy that organization has been able to do. And Mom's Demand has been an established organization for years. It was very well funded, and March for Our Lives started with 12 kids on a living room floor a couple of years ago and has spread to being a national organization. They have over 300 chapters in states all across the country, and they have an annual summit where they get together with their volunteers and share best practices, and they're that's, you know, they've all become friends and it's really interesting, but they're kind of creating the boat while they're at sea. So it's been very interesting to see that. And the other thing that's interesting is through meeting the people in Moms Demand and also the kids in March for Our Lives, you can see, as Celeste was saying, there's a lot of common issues that various communities around the country are facing, even though gun violence affects communities very differently in the specific instances. The way that that trauma perpetuates itself in communities is kind of a common experience that unites people. And the power of people coming together to fight it in a united way has really it's been amazing to see that there's been a lot of progress very recently on that. And I'm wearing this shirt for you, Adam, today. March for Our Lives shirt. If you look at the you focus on the QR code with your phone, it'll take you to a website to register to vote in 2 minutes. And it's the version of the shirt they did for Pride last year.
I love it. Oh my gosh. So beautiful.
Excellent.
Totally getting one.
So I thought we'd start out on a sort of personal basis. I mean, all of us are affected by what's going on now. And you don't have to go into like personal details exactly, but how is everyone doing? How are you guys handling the quarantine, the reaction, all of it? Beth, let's start with you and then we'll go back around.
Okay. Yeah, there's the personal, the way that we're all dealing with it personally, and then there's the way that it affects what we're doing and the kind of advocacy and activism that we're trying to do. Personally, I got everybody in my house on the Wi-Fi all the time. In my day job is I'm an office manager at a law firm, so that's happening in the living room. My husband's been working from home for 2 years in the bedroom. And I got 2 kids who are doing college from home. So the kitchen is now the break room. And thank God we have a patio and it's Florida and we can get outside is all I can say. And so far the Wi-Fi is holding out. But so that's been a challenge. But so far everybody's healthy and we're just trying to find toilet paper, and I don't think we're alone in this. But in terms of the advocacy, it's interesting because I have the kind of eyes on 2 organizations. Moms Demand is a very event-driven organization. Like their motto is "We show up." It's a sea of red shirts everywhere. They do community outreach. They do events with schools, with local law enforcement. It's new member recruiting, and then they also there's a social aspect of those meetings that it enforces the cohesion of the group. And you have the local groups, and they feed into the state groups, and it feeds into it's this whole organization, and it's built on personal connections, which are fostered by regular monthly meetings. So that's been hard. And the first 10 minutes of any meeting is a bunch of people trying to figure out Zoom. So that's that changes things. And so we've been having to adapt to, well, what can we do online? What's our social media presence? How much of this stuff can we do virtually? How much of this stuff can we do via email? And it's been kind of a challenge to reinvent that stuff. March for Our Lives has always had a really big digital presence. The kids are spread all over the country. The challenge for them is they're all trying to go to college now and school and still be activists in their spare time. So they've done some stuff with digital hubs, and they've had some guest speakers Zoom in and stuff like that. But they're a little bit more nimble with that kind of stuff. Fortunately for Moms Demand, our advocacy day is during the legislative session is January and February. So we were able to complete that. That's our big, outreach event of the year. And then the things that we're focusing on right now are safe storage and prepping for the elections. And it's kind of the irony is that those are both harder to do right now, but they're both more important because you got all these people trapped at home with kids and guns and people losing their jobs and people in abusive relationships. And if you live in a state that hasn't closed the boyfriend loophole, if you're a woman in a house with a gun, you are 5 times more likely to be shot with that gun. And it's a big, there's no safe storage requirement in Florida at the moment. So it's a big concern. So, and then for the elections, we got through our primary here in March, right before everything went crazy and you had a really bad primary situations in California and stuff. but that was just the presidential preference primary, and it was just the Democratic candidates. But we have the actual primary in August, and there's a bunch of local races on there. And now what we're trying to push is, Florida is one of the states which is not true in every state, where you don't need an excuse to vote by mail. You don't need anything signed. You don't need anything notarized. You can just go on the website, Broward, whatever your county supervisor of election is, request a paper ballot. If everybody does that in time and gets a paper ballot, then if voting is not a problem in August, you can just bring your paper ballot with you, whether it's marked or not, and you can turn it in and they cancel it and you can vote in person. But at least you'll have it as an option. And if you decide at the last minute, like a lot of people in Wisconsin did, well, I don't want to go to the polls, and then you haven't received it or you can't postmark it in time. And we know already, I mean, it's Florida. I'm not expecting the election to go smoothly or anybody at the state level to be really vested in that happening. So like both of those, safe storage and elections are both more challenging right now, but it's really important that we try to figure out whatever we can do online or social media to push forward with both of those.
Celeste?
Well, we've been very, very privileged with this, that I think back to so many times in my life when I was dealing with young children and aging parents, and and how impossible and terrible life would be if I was in those situations. And now, empty nesters with no aging parents and no kids at home, and and my biggest problem is figuring out how to get the groceries. But everybody I know is dealing with something really, really awful. Like, I'm talking to an online friend who I just shoot the breeze with, and then her baby has terrible teething ear infection issues, and she can't get to the doctor. And the doctor is just doing virtual calls, and it took her like a week just to set that up. And meanwhile, the baby is screaming and nobody's getting any sleep. And there's something that should have been just a no-brainer. Friend of my daughter's who has a terrible toothache and probably needs a root canal, which is no fun, but he can't even get to the dentist because the dentist is closed down, and they've said, we are not seeing anybody until this is over. And my daughter has had 3 jobs a month ago, and now she has half of one of them, and she's trying to file for unemployment. She lives in Pennsylvania, and there is no mechanism for filing right now, so she has to wait a few weeks before she can even file. So everybody that I know is just affected by this in some terrible, terrible way, and it's just awful. And while we don't personally know anyone who's died yet, I know people who have died. And I know people who've been sick. So it's just awful, and it just is awful. Yeah. From an advocacy standpoint, it's just surreal. Just a month ago, I was standing in front of my local precinct handing out flyers to all the people who are voting on Super Tuesday. Remember Super Tuesday?
It's a million years ago.
Yeah. And I was standing there holding out flyers for a Defeat Trump rally that the local Democrats were going to do at the firehouse. And we were going to get 200 people from the community, from our little magisterial district in one space. And we're going to be inspiring, and food and camaraderie and networking and education. And we were going to galvanize everybody in the neighborhood to go out there and get out the vote to stop Trump and raise some money too. And everybody was so psyched and so excited, and everybody signed up. And of course, there was no rally, there was no event. And I don't know how they got out of the contract with the firehouse, but all of a sudden, everything that had been planned, they had this big, well thought out plan for how they were going to get out the vote, how they were going to galvanize the group, and now it was gone. And that's really hard to deal with. In February, which again seems like a century ago, I was in Philadelphia for an all-day workshop with a bunch of grant makers about how they were going to get out the vote in Pennsylvania. And again, the activists in Pennsylvania have all these cool ideas for getting out the vote in communities of color, of which there are a growing many in Pennsylvania, especially in southeastern Pennsylvania. And they had all these strategies for going door to door, knocking on doors and getting people to the polls, and explaining this complicated new system they've got they're just starting voting by mail in Pennsylvania now, but it's a new system and it's never been tested before, and it's got some complications, and there's going to be a learning curve, and there's going to be a lot of education that needs to be done.
What could go wrong?
Exactly. What could go wrong? And there were enough things that could go wrong. You know, a lot of us were kind of muttering about that at the workshop, but nobody anticipated this. And it's just really bizarre. And so now everybody's talking about voting by mail all over the country, which is good. And it's an awesome thing, but you really don't want to try to create a new system from scratch in the most high stakes election of our time. And
Yeah.
I think the woman who did it in Washington State said that it took 20 years for them to switch over Washington State to a completely vote by mail. 20 years.
Yeah. And it probably wouldn't take that long for us because we could learn from their mistakes and everything other, but it's not going to happen overnight. And I don't know if anyone here has tried voting by mail in Virginia, but it's not an easy process.
No, and the legislature didn't do a lot to make that better.
Right.
The most that we did was we got rid of it used to be if you wanted to absentee vote or vote by mail, you had to give an explanation for why you couldn't vote in person, and we got rid of that. But a lot of the rest of it, it's still out there. And of course, I think we're all worried about, that, okay, some states will be proactive and work on this. And there are other states where the administration and the legislature want to suppress the vote and have no interest in making it easier for people to vote. In fact, are very comfortable with, we saw this in Wisconsin, are very comfortable with letting things just go on as they have been in the past. Adam, how are you handling it yourself, and how is this affecting what you guys do?
Can y'all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good, yes.
Okay, perfect. I had a little bit of an issue with the phone, so So I am adjusting for sure. It's crazy because kind of like y'all were saying, it's like, it feels like a long time ago that we were doing all of these events and planning and, I was ready to start, phase 2 of this, which is like, let's get the word out that this has happened, but let's also spread awareness about how big of an issue this is. So we had an event with VCU that we were going to do, Virginia Commonwealth University, about healing from conversion therapy. That was going to be the focus of the event, and we were going to have the mayor there and, myself and potentially other survivors and, a couple other different college events, and it's, even something as massive as the signing ceremony, the governor's signing ceremony for this bill. I don't actually know if that's going to happen or not,
Oh.
Yeah. And yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Well, he's
I know.
So it's one of those things. It's, I've been in contact with them, and they just went, we're kind of busy right now. So I think we will get a ceremony, but it could be in August. I mean, who knows? And I know that's little stuff, but this goes to something else that we'll talk about. And I'd cut you off. I'll let you go back in a second. But part of the reason you have a signing ceremony is so that you can turn that around and use it to raise money. And this is stuff that, we're getting killed. We suspended our spring fundraiser because in good conscience, I mean, we're a policy organization. I can't say, you should be giving us money so that we can lobby bills, in next January or lobby Congress. It's not that that's not important, but I mean, you should be giving your money to food drives and blood banks and, buying PPE for hospitals and stuff like that. So I didn't feel comfortable asking, but it doesn't mean that we don't need the money,
Right. And then everybody's hurting. I was just talking to somebody who was on a call with one of the big international humanitarian organizations. Ones you know who they are, and very, very wealthy, and they're hurting. Every nonprofit, every organization. Did you hear the NRA laid off 60 people?
Oh, breaking
send in thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. But it just shows you the vastness of this. This is hitting everybody, the people we like, the people we don't like.
Definitely.
But it also means that we're all in competition with everybody, that on top of everything else, we have to be fighting for relevance. And I think Scott has a good case to make that, yes, people are dying, and yes, people are starving, and yes, people have lost their jobs. But if we don't take back our democracy, this is going to get worse.
Well, and the point I was trying to make about the things that we just had a Zoom call for the moms, my local group of moms. And we're talking about, we were going to do a big Wear Orange event that was like everybody actually showing up, because we do all these in-person things and wearing orange and taking pictures and posting on social media. And I'm like, well, then you can just change your profile picture. You could just tell everybody in your Facebook group, change your profile picture to this thing that says wear orange, or just make it orange. Like, just turn Facebook orange for the day. It doesn't cost anything. Nobody is social distancing. It's fine. But you just have to think outside of this is the way we've always done it kind of thing. But it's not, and their point was kind of, it's hard to get people to focus on this stuff when we're having a quarantine. But it's not disconnected, because the communities of color, which are disproportionately affected by gun violence here, those are the people that disproportionately have their paper ballots discounted when they turn them in. And they're also people that are being disproportionately with a higher morbidity rate for COVID-19. So it's, and the kids that are home from school are in homes with unsecured guns. And I don't know if you have this, and you did have it in Virginia. I don't know if it's still the case. In Florida, gun shops and pawn shops, as long as they sell guns and ammunition, are essential businesses. Have you seen those lines around the block of people buying guns because they think there's going to be looting and they want to keep themselves safe? The statistics do not support this. If you have a gun in your home, you are statistically much likelier to be a victim of being shot by that gun than to protect yourself. But of course, the NRA doesn't want you to know that statistic. So all across the country, people are stockpiling guns and bringing them. And these are people who have no training, which is also not required in Florida, that you have any kind of training or license or anything for a gun. And you can buy as many guns as you want. If you can buy a gun, you can buy a bunch of guns, and you can buy as much ammunition as you want. And there's no training. You can put it in the trunk of your car and drive it home with your 6-year-old in the back seat. So they're not unconnected issues. They're actually, it's more important to talk about safe storage now. And it's more important to talk about how we vote now, because the reason we're in this situation with the quarantine is, the response to being as bad as it is because we have people in the government who are on a molecular level incompetent and have the moral compass of, I think it would be maligning any creature on God's earth that I could compare them to. They just really fundamentally do not care. I'm still waiting for someone to come up with evidence that Trump owns stock in a company that's making hydrochloroquine because he can pronounce that. He can't pronounce coronavirus. So
it was my first assumption. Wasn't it everybody else's that Jared's got stock in it or something.
Yeah,
I mean,
I did see that a big Republican donor has been pushing it, so maybe that's all it takes. But they're not disconnected, and we are fighting for relevance and we're fighting for dollars. But there's a way to reach out to people and educate people and keep people informed and just connect the dots for people and say, the reason why we're in this situation is because elections matter. And the reason why there are places in the country that are doing a better job is because they have Democratic governors who are not incompetent and who actually care about the people that they're governing. The governor in Florida parrots everything that the president says, but waits until he says it to do the same thing. So we have not, we didn't have the shutdown when we should have. He still hasn't said that he's going to keep schools closed until the end of the year. It's this rolling thing where it's county by county, but of course people move county to county. Now they have roadblocks set up so you can't get into the Keys without a resident sticker, and there's a black market in resident stickers. It's just, it's a little predictable, but so yeah, it's a more challenging environment, but the stakes are also higher because everything that we're doing is really important for people. And there's a way, I think, to still move the needle and make a difference without charging a lot of money, or not charging, like spending a lot of money on it. And there's a way to stay relevant if we connect what we're trying to do to what people are going through right now.
I think you're very right. Adam, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was just agreeing.
Yeah. No. So yeah, it is really problematic because this sucks all the air out of everything else, and at the same time, Beth's absolutely correct that it's all connected. I mean, the reason, look, any president would have a problem with something like this. That's perfectly understandable. But we have a president who is a con man and kind of stupid and a criminal. I mean, for the most part. And
has the attention span of a 3-year-old.
Yeah, and who spends most of his time either patting himself on the back or bitching about people he's unhappy with. There's a reason that we have that, because there's something structurally wrong with the way we do democracy in America, and that's at the. I mean, this is a natural disaster, but as we see in like Puerto Rico or with Katrina in New Orleans, you can either handle a natural disaster well and competently, or you can screw it up completely. And that's what we're getting from this administration. And it's not something that fell out of the sky. We've all known for the last 3.5 years that if something went really bad, we wouldn't be able to handle it. And all of this stuff comes back together. We were talking about gun stuff. APV works on violence against women, and that's going to be a real issue as these people, these families that are dysfunctional and have problems are put together with a combination of firearms or psychological and emotional problems and alcohol and drugs.
Alcohol is liquor stores are an essential business too. So you can get all the liquor and drug and guns you want, but nobody has access to mental health care, and everybody's out of a job.
Now, I'm not gonna make the outrageous idea that alcohol isn't an essential. For some people, it's an accelerant to really good behavior.
Pennsylvania has shut down their liquor stores. By the way,
I thought that would have people out in the streets, honestly, but apparently not. But no,
I did hear a headline that around the world domestic violence is on the increase.
I bet.
It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I mean, if you are cramped up, one of the things that, as I understand it, that women who are in abusive relationships, if they can get out of their houses, if they can make contact with other people, if they can form some kind of care group, whether it's somebody to confide in, whether it's somebody who can help them make decisions and get out of the situation they're in, the outcome's a lot better. But in a situation where you're literally being told never leave the house, and often when I'm not an expert on the intricacies of domestic violence, Thank you. Thank you, God. But you know, I mean, people get wound up. They get wound up, and
Yeah.
it's got to be a real issue.
It's not only domestic violence. 60% of the gun deaths in America are suicide, and suicide attempted with a firearm is successful 95% of the time. And a lot of those suicides are young people. So you're taking young people who are under stress anyway, away from all of their social connections, except for social media, which is not always, you know, it can be supportive and can not, and cooping up at home with their parents and the pressure of still being at school, and no access to mental health care, which has been a big issue in our community since our shooting 2 years ago, that we had a lot of resources poured into the community, and it's still not working because people are expected to self-advocate, or to self-diagnose and to advocate for themselves. And these are people with mental illness. And that, I mean, it's just common sense. It doesn't work. And I heard the vice president say that yesterday from the podium, that if you need something, we're here for you, just reach out. And I'm like, dude, a 14-year-old boy who is depressed is not going to pick up the phone and say, I need help. He's just not going to come out of his room. And if he's in a room with a firearm, or if he's in a house with a firearm, he might not come back. So, you know, and that happens. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
So, you know, spreading awareness, think that can happen right now, and it can save lives right now. But this is going to continue for a while. And the good news, though, think about this, because it's getting kind of dark, is one of the big things that Moms Demand had planned in April was going to be a big national training thing. It was going to coincide with the NRA's national convention, which had to be canceled. So the reason we're not doing anything this one particular day in April is because the NRA had to cancel their convention. So there is a silver lining. That part of the reason why we're not so busy is that we're not responding to assholes like that all the time. So
Right.
that, you know, I mean, you know, we can't organize and have events, but Trump can't have rallies either. I mean, he's got, you know, the nightly soapbox, but he doesn't get that stroking from that he used to go into a rally full of 35,000 crazy people and, you know, have him screaming. That he's not getting that. And I think also it's killing him that he's stuck in the White House. You know, I can just feel the need to golf, you know, every time he's on screen. It's like, where's my putter? So, you know, there's a bright side to that. But I wanted to say something else about the mental health aspect, not just of, you know, the gun violence thing, but activism. There is a significant indication that being involved in activism about social causes like this, things that have motivated you, because most of us have had some kind of personal experience of something, like you were saying, Adam, being a survivor of some kind of traumatic event. The activism that we do is in itself inherently reactivates that trauma to a certain extent. Every time you have to tell your story, every time you meet another survivor, every time you have to, you know, address the issue in any way and bear witness to it, it takes a toll. And that's just during a good time. So self-care should be completely baked into any kind of social activism organization from the beginning, and the understanding that self-care is not self-indulgence. It's actually being responsible, because if you take care of yourself, the people who care about you aren't going to have to worry about you. And it's okay to take a break. And that's also concerning for people that are doing it, that like you're doing activism, but you're stuck in your house. It's like, where's the border? When do I get to clock out? And now that we can't do a lot of the stuff that we used to do, there's a feeling like I'm not doing enough. I didn't have any meetings this month. I didn't do, you know, one of the things Mom Demands does is we send out postcards to prospective voters, and we can't do that because we can't do mail, and nobody's got money for postage. And it's, you know, it's just, we would have these like meetings where 12 people would sit around a table and write postcards, and it's very motivating, and you reach out to people, and you can't do that. So then you feel like, well, I'm not doing anything. And you have to, we all have to give ourselves a moment, you know, for as long as this lasts, and realize that whatever you can do is okay. And you know, there's going to be a lot more to do later when we come out of this. It's still going to be months before the election, and there's going to be a shorter window, and there's going to be less resources because we haven't been able to fundraise. But we're just going to have more work to do later, and it's going to be hard, but it'll be possible. But right now, you know, taking some time to, I'm trying to spend time online learning more stuff, like looking at more stuff and getting more stats and more statistics, connecting with other people, making sure that the information that I'm getting, I'm also disseminating, and I'm trying to, communicate with people. As you said, Celeste, there's some of the best things about being involved in this kind of stuff is the people that you meet. We always say that I love having met you, and I wish I didn't have to have met you because of what's connecting us. So, fostering those connections, checking on those people, seeing how they're doing, and then they're sharing their stories about the challenges that they're facing. You just feel like you're part of a community still, and everybody's got a lot of the same challenges, but and really encouraging everybody who's trying to do this stuff to take care of yourself at this time, because it's always hard, and now it's even harder.
There's a sense of helplessness that I hear from a lot of my membership. And this goes back now for a long time. You win one fight and then you lose 3 more, and the other side always has more money, and they have this sort of clone army that they can always turn to. And it is I think it's really difficult, especially with something like this, as Adam can say, we won big victories this year in Virginia.
Yeah.
And they're still there, but at the same time, it feels there's a sense of negation, and there's a sense of unreality. I swear, at this point, there's a sense that we just went from one world into another.
Yes. And
it is extremely difficult to get people up and moving again. When, obviously people are concerned about about their jobs. There's a good chance we're going to be in some kind of depression 2.0 by the end of this year. It is hard to get people up and moving on issues that are important, and very important, in fact, but often seem, less important in the grand scale of things. I think that is one of the hardest things to address, that sense of just sort of zeitgeist depression, that all that this seems to bring with it. I wanted to go back for one thing, because Beth, you were talking about guns in the home and things like that, and suicide. I know, Adam, you're familiar with the impact that suicide has on LGBTQ young people, and the problems that go along with that. And I've got to assume that all of that is exasperated by what we've been seeing.
Yeah, I got an email from the Trevor Project, actually. They're an organization that works really tight with LGBTQ youth and suicide prevention. And, as you can imagine, they have resources such as like a digital space and a call helpline. And, they reported that they have seen an increase in calls, which makes total sense. Also, I am a suicide survivor and a conversion therapy survivor. And I worry about my community because, I think about kids who may be at home in a non-supportive environment,
100%,
and
100%.
They may not have the escape of going to school and kind of being able to be genuinely themselves for however many hours a day that they usually have that opportunity. And so I'm definitely concerned. Also, in terms of just survivors of conversion therapy, obviously this pandemic is happening everywhere. And so with us, kind of sharing our stories and being on the front line and being so involved in advocacy, there's almost a sense of, if you're not careful, a sense of false validation of kind of like having inner strength, going from, I've had this traumatic event to now I'm, a spokesperson, now I'm an advocate. And so clearly that means that I am, I have this internal strength to get me through something like this, which is kind of a dangerous misconception, because it's like, there's still that work that needs to be done in terms of taking care of yourself, figuring out, how to respond to trauma, how to move forward, how to live in the present, how to decompress. Easter's coming up, which if you've gone through conversion therapy, it could be a very triggering holiday, you know? And so there's just a lot of things that I've kind of got my radar on with a lot of my friends to just check in on.
Yeah,
Very,
and I think that touches lots of communities. I mean, we know that the morbidity for African Americans is much higher, and that, you know, that is a glaring spotlight on inequality.
Yeah.
But is that what we're going to see? I mean, I have a really harsh critique of the media, and that goes, I think, as well to what we're seeing with the handling of the coronavirus. I think they're doing a really awful job. And I'm not surprised because they're really not good at this stuff. They love ongoing crises because they can cover it 24 hours a day, but they do such an awful job of it. And you know, it's exposing all of the disparities in our society, and economy, and all of the problems that we have with the way incidents are framed. I mean, this is going to end up being like everything else. You know, however this, I mean, this is going to be going on for a while.
Yeah.
But don't you? I don't know if you agree with me that it's going to boil down to partisan politics and some kind of media critique of whether Trump handled it really badly or just badly or mediocrely or whatever. It's so.
I
don't feel like it's going to shift. I feel like we're in this horrible, you know, circle of hell where everything just repeats itself.
welcome to episode 1 of Scott's Circle of Hell.
Well, I mean, we're all too young to remember the Depression or World War II, and you know, we heard our parents talk about this stuff and talk about it. Some of us, or we watched the movies, but these big disasters, what we see are the highlights. You know, we see the people coming together and we see the victories, and if we see the downsides, it's well, yes, that was bad, but then this happened, and you know, we know we won. We beat the Depression. We beat World War II. And what we forget, and we won the Civil War, at least we thought we did. And what we forget is that when we were in the middle of it, it looked exactly as bad as it does right now.
Yeah, but I will say that you know, the World War II happened at a time where every major American city had 3 or 4 newspapers. And now what's happened over the past 30, 40 years is the newspapers have gone away, and the news on TV has been taken over by the entertainment wing of all the networks. So it has to turn a profit. And I mean, I draw a line in my mind between reporters and journalists, because a lot of the people that I don't even know why they're covering the briefings. They're not briefings. There's no information. It's just bullshit and posturing, and you know, and it's actually killing people, because what the president says is misinformation and confuses them, and then they take the wrong medicine and a couple of people have died. I mean, that's just, I don't even know why they're still covering. It's insane. It's the same thing in Florida. They cover when the governor has a news conference, and then some of the reporters said that they were told at the end of this one news conference that they could ask questions from their seats, but then that didn't happen. So like, if you want to ask any other questions, they were kind of milling around. So they had a gaggle. It's a pandemic. And there's pictures of like 30 people all around the governor with boom mics, some of them wearing masks. I'm like, okay, if it was just the Darwin Awards, it would be awesome. They could just all die. It would be great, but they're going to infect the rest of us. And if Fauci gets sick, we riot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I feel like you and I could probably have an entire episode talking about.
Let's do a podcast, Adam.
Like between conversion therapy survivors in the media, and I'm sure what you and Emma have gone through just with the media, like, oh my gosh, we could have our own.
It's nuts. Well, and what March for Our Lives from the beginning, they made really deep and real connections with young activists from communities of color all around the country, been disproportionately affected by gun violence, and nobody paid any freaking attention. And they actually had situations where they would be standing right next to a kid from another community, and that kid was talking and the camera was on the kid from Parkland. And there was one that happened right before the march in Washington. I was standing next to Emma. She was talking with this other kid who I think was from DC. And she actually reached out her hand and turned the camera with her hand, pushed it. So, because the kid was talking and the camera wasn't even on him.
Yeah.
So
every time I see this next generation, I'm like, we're going to be okay.
Well, and okay, so that's another thing I'm going to tell Scott, if I can reach out to him in his circle of hell, come on back, is it's really important. It's kind of a dark time. We're all really concerned about the people in our communities that are suffering, that we know are not getting the attention, and it's not being reported. It's being reported in this fake kind of like, what did he say now, the latest outrage of the day, or, you know, chasing down his latest bullshit claim. And I don't even know why we're doing that. But the reality is that it's a really, you know, it's a crucial time for the media to step up and report what's actually going on, because otherwise people are going to really pay the price. And I don't think that we've ever been in a situation in our country before where we're facing a crisis like this. And it's really 1984. It's really where, you know, they control the narrative about what's happening, and people believe it so much that they're not looking at the reality right in front of them. I heard some people saying on some podcast a couple of weeks ago, you know, I think when things get really bad here, people aren't going to be able to deny the reality anymore, because there's just going to be too many people dying. Nope. And it is getting really bad, and they're still denying it. It was like, I don't understand. But okay, but I was going to talk about the couple of bright spots. I'm sorry, I feel negative about. So what it's really important to realize that what happened in Virginia last year was epic, and I know a bunch of other Virginians down here, and we were all beside ourselves. It was insane. We were so excited, and we would give anything. We would give our eye teeth to have 1/10 of that happen here. So it's, you know, there's it's really important that every victory that happens, whether or not it resonates as much in the zeitgeist as we would want, just because of what's going on now in the wider world, we have to kind of internalize that and draw energy from that and say, stuff is really I have people that come up to me who aren't in like the gun violence prevention bubble. They say, oh, what's the kids doing now? Like, that was a while ago. And I'm like, I'm really aware of all the stuff that they're doing, but it's kind of inside baseball. So it's important to remember that in 2018, there were like 50 some gun violence regulation or pieces of legislation passed in state legislatures. Nothing happens federally, but stuff that there hadn't been a piece of legislation in the Florida legislature about guns for 20 years. And they got a bill. The kids got a bill passed. You know, it's like every step forward is one step forward that you don't have to spend any more resources to make. Yeah. And you can build from that and keep moving forward. So, you know, it's just going to be harder and it's going to take time, but it doesn't mean that progress isn't happening.
Yeah.
Oh, I think so. And I didn't mean to think that and there's a tendency, I think, as Beth and I know as historians, to say, you know, there's this telelogic Whig view of history where things are always moving forward. Mm-hmm. And it's an idea that exists in hindsight, right? Right? Like you said about the Second World War, or like Celeste said, we know how this works out. So all the things that these people are going through are going to end up okay. You know, I mean, because, you know, the good guys win and so on and so forth. But real history means that some things move forward, some things are moving back at the same time. That you can have progress in one place and in one field, and you can be losing ground in another.
You can have progress for one group of people, like the white people get to move ahead and the black people have to take 2 steps back.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I have a tendency these days to see the glass half empty. But you're exactly right. I mean, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think that it was worthwhile, and that we aren't going to that we're not making, that we're not making progress. I think, Adam can talk about this too. Paradigms shift, and when they shift really fast. What happened a decade ago with don't ask, don't tell, things like that. That's a genie that I don't think they can put back in the bottle. well, they're trying, God
They're
forbid.
trying.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that there was a cultural shift.
Yeah.
And I think that is a thing that you can't predict, because if you had told me that was going to happen, I would have been skeptical. And I've learned certainly over the last 3.5 years, that I am not good at prognosticating. I'm really pretty bad at prognosticating, and I hold hope out for the fact that I'm not good at prognosticating. So
Well, it's also, I mean, look at marriage equality.
yeah,
10 years
Yeah.
ago, would you ever have thought? I mean, that was a seismic shift that took everybody by surprise.
Oops.
Right. That
and it
is,
happened in strange spots too. I mean, I came out of Utah, right? I mean, it passed in Utah and Nevada, and so some of these big sky states that you would not expect that to come out of.
Yeah, I think
I
it
cut you
even.
off, Adam.
oh no, you're good. Conversion therapy is also illegal for minors in Utah, which not a lot of people know.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. My friend Justin over there had a lot to do with it, and Equality Utah, and they really did a great job over there. But yeah, to your point, like marriage equality was like such a battle, and to think like our community has fought for so much visibility in general. Just I'm watching a documentary right now, a docudrama, When We Rise, that ABC aired. It's super good.
Oh, I gotta look
I'm
at
actually, yes, I'm holding a watch party with some survivors, like a private watch party that we're going to watch and kind of discuss it and just talk about our history, a history that like we didn't know about growing up, because as we're being told to change who we are, we didn't learn about Stonewall,
Right.
so,
Right.
but yeah, like you said, that's a major win, and there are some things that I just don't see going back, but it doesn't mean the other side isn't going to try,
Yeah.
and I think our maintained visibility means that we cannot settle because the other side is ready,
They never settle. They never settle. They don't give up. They don't quit.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the one thing about that too. So we met a really amazing group of Indigenous young people that were at Standing Rock, and they were at this event in Washington we went to, and every time that they were in public as a group, they were in their regalia and they were calling each other by their Indigenous names and speaking their various languages. And the phrase that they used is that our existence is resistance. Just being present, just refusing to go away is part of what that is activism in their community.
Our existence is resistance. I love it.
Right. And the thing that gives me hope is just it's stupid, like they can't do math. The other side cannot do math. They are a shrinking pie piece of the population, and they keep pissing off the rest of the pie and saying you're shit and we don't have to deal with you because our pie is just the best piece. And at some point over the last 1.5 2 years, I must have filled out some online survey about Trump, because now I get emails from the Trump campaign, which is hilarious, because I'll get like an email from Scott and then one from Don Jr. right above it in my inbox. I gotta like screenshot that. But it's there, I see what they're writing, and they're just this completely insular message just to the base, and they're like, if I could just hold on to this 38%, I'm good. So they're betting that the other 62% of the population is not going to show up. But increasingly the population is younger and browner and more diverse and more tolerant and looking forward. And the way forward, the way out of all of these problems is to move forward. It's not to stay with what we have. It's not good to go back to even the era of Barack Obama. It's to continue moving forward, because we have new challenges and we have new problems and we have to keep moving forward. So the only way possible forward that's actually going to address the issues confronting my kids' generation, because they're completely fed up. They're like, y'all fuck the planet. Now you're letting us, now we can't even go to school and see our friends. And they're like, you, why should I believe anything that you tell me? I'm just gonna yeah, okay, boomer. I'm just gonna go to it's just they're not wrong. They're not wrong.
Oh.
but they're going to come up with new solutions and new programs and new processes, and they're going to move it forward. And the older, whiter, more conservative voters are eventually, as the kid said once, we're going to outlive you and we're going to outvote you. So it may take time, but eventually and it's not like they're not going to dig in their heels and say, fascism is awesome. It's always great. Let's just say fascism.
Young people are going to win the war. There's no question about that, because they're going to be around when we're all gone. The question is whether there'll be anything for them to be on.
Yeah. Well, that's the other, they're running out of patience because they're running out of time, and it isn't making them more moderate.
No.
It's not making them more moderate. It's not making them more patient. It's not making them want to sit down and listen to us and have us tell them about
all the awfulness that's happening here. There is a lot of potential for the argument. Like just a few weeks ago, Medicare for all was an abstraction for a lot of people. And now all of a sudden people are realizing, oh my God, if I get this thing, I'm going to have to pay for it, and I'm probably, and it's going to be horrifically expensive, and I've just lost my health insurance. And, all of a sudden this Medicare for all seems very reasonable. It should not be that hard for activists to be able to make that case now, because there's something really, really current that is making them realize this could happen to me, this could happen to anybody.
And beyond healthcare, Celeste, in addition to that,
just universal basic income, that's the other one, is that all the people are, oh my God, this isn't just a pipe dream. We actually need this because our jobs could be cut off at any minute.
Which is sort of what the government just did, because they're extending health insurance and jobless benefits for a long time, but which is kind of giving the lie to the whole Grover Norquist thing about drowning the government in a bathtub. When people turn to the federal government, and it is literally their job for just this specific kind of situation where, like, states can't deal with it, and we need a federal stockpile, and we need a federal response. And that old thing where it's like, this is just a test. This was not a true emergency. If this was, with the beep. If this was a real emergency, you would have been given information on where to go and what to do. I don't think there's anybody on the other end of that phone right now. And I think people kind of expected that there would be. So this is actually, it's not just that people are saying, wow, Medicare for all sounds like a good idea, or universal basic income, but also there is really a role for the federal government, and it should be staffed by competent people who are not partisan because of this. Because like having Jared Kushner figure out a COVID response, like as well as he did figuring out the Middle East. I mean, that was amazing. I'm so glad we resolved that, because that was really bugging me.
Think about how hard that would be.
God, that's over.
If you hadn't already fixed it.
Yeah, I know. That would be great. So, you know what I'm saying? It's like it's not like people are going to say, wow, this is, the things are really bad with the virus, despite whatever Trump tells them. But a lot of people are looking at this and saying, whoa, this is a shit show. And it's exhausting and it's terrifying. And I really would like to have some competent people who actually realize that there is a job for the federal government. It's not the federal government's stockpile to keep the federal government stockpile is for the federal government. It's not for the states.
And by them, they mean literally them.
Them, like literally the people in this room right here. We're getting all the masks and ventilators. So, maybe that's another silver lining, is that out of this, there's a whole new discussion about what's the role of a federal government. He fired everybody who was in the pandemic office because, I don't know, why would you do that?
Well, for a generation, more than a generation, we've been told that government is incompetent. It can't do anything. It just spends money. It's all just a giant bureaucracy that does nothing.
And the private sector can do it better.
Exactly. And so we have a self-fulfilling prophecy here for conservatives. Right now, the trouble is, around the country, the same people who boo-hooed about 9/11 and who just, had all the T-shirts with the two towers on them and all this stuff, are the same people who now are going, well, these people are in New York. It doesn't affect me. It's not in my community. Why should we worry about any of this?
It will emphasize is that it does affect all of us, because we all have friends and family. And if we want to ever be able to move or change jobs or visit or anything, that we don't want to have a situation where we have to use a passport just to go over to the next state.
I don't think people realize that it is going to go everywhere. I mean, the idea that Trump can say it's peaking this week because it's peaking in New York, maybe. Our peak is supposed to be maybe the first week of, was supposed to be the first week of May. Now it's coming earlier, which is good, but they're saying it's still going to be a really bad, maybe still the same number of deaths. And that's just, not every county in Florida is affected. So the governor doesn't want to shut down every county like he did Miami-Dade and Broward and Palm Beach. But people move, people drive.
It's in May. Yeah.
It's insane to think that there is going to be any part of this country it's not going to be touched by this in some way.
And
Did you guys read about the ski
Yeah.
resort in Idaho that has had a higher death rate than New York per capita? And it's all because of rich people who were going there to ski to get away from this all.
It's the Decameron.
Wow. Wow.
Oh
And Trump was,
Wow.
and I bet there were no good stories told.
Poetic justice, party two, your table is ready.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you know,
Oh my God.
yes, Adam.
Oh, I was just agreeing. Like that. That's insane.
But there,
Yeah.
you know, the other part of it is that they're also like the Navajo Nation, and I think it was in Arizona, as there are more deaths than the entire rest of the state. So it's really showing up, like you said, Scott. It's showing up. It's not the great equalizer. We're all stuck at home and everybody's having trouble finding toilet paper, but it's disproportionately affecting the most marginalized communities in the country.
Well, and what it's going to do to the rural population. We have a real issue with healthcare in rural communities, right? Clinics have been closing for decades now. It's hard to get doctors. I mean, we've had this conversation in Virginia a lot, trying to get doctors into the southwest part of the state, giving people bonuses to move to Danville or to go to Bristol and stay there, you know, like the Peace Corps, honestly, or Vista, if you guys remember Vista, for healthcare workers. And you know, that is going to play out. It is tougher in urban areas. It's tougher where people are concentrated because it's easier to spread. But you know, when people are going to get sick in these areas, and there's going to be nothing there for them, except those people are Trump people. And I bet suddenly the federal government is in there with FEMA as much as they can do. But if it, you know, I don't know. Everything.
But they don't have a mechanism, you know, like,
I know.
You know,
Yeah.
I rode with an ambulance driver about 10 years ago. Long story. I spent an hour riding with him, and he was telling me in rural Ohio, and he was telling me these stories about how he would be on this ambulance and he would be actually performing surgery in the ambulance. He was a paramedic, but he would have to perform some sort of minor surgery just to get the patient alive in the time that it took an hour to take them to the hospital.
Oh my God. That's
And
unbelievable.
this was 10 years ago, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, you multiply that story and that guy and that ambulance all over rural America, and all the people who are going to need help, it's not going to happen.
Well, there's so many other elements. I was listening to the story this morning about how food banks don't have food, but there's vegetable growers in Florida that are plowing under their crops because they can't afford to pay the payers to pick them. The other thing that's going on here is that a lot of the agricultural workers are undocumented, and if they don't work, they can't, you know, register for unemployment benefits, and they don't have health insurance, and they don't have any access to health care because they're in some of the remoter areas of Florida. So, you know, there goes the food chain, and the people who are out of work are going to food banks. There's not enough food being donated because a lot of food was being donated by grocery stores. Do you know that 40% of the food in this country is thrown out?
Yeah.
40% of the food produced is thrown out. So, you know, now the grocery stores are selling out. So they don't have as much people are buying dented cans. They don't have as much to donate. And the farmers are, you know, farmers in the Northeast are dairy farmers are pouring their milk out on the ground because they can't sell it to schools for school lunches because the kids aren't at school. But those same kids are hungry. They still need food. Well, when their parents go to a food bank, there's no food. So it's, you know, it's supply chain issues. It's a lot of there's no federal government cooperation. That's the like somebody asleep at the switch issue. There's the medical system issue, the lack of, you know, we're going to need an army of medical staff all across the country as this plays out, because you go up to the peak and then there's the other part of the bell curve where it goes
Where the
down.
other half of the deaths
The
occur.
other half of the deaths occur. So it's like, you got a terrible day and then an even worse day, and then you go back to just being terrible. And then it's a slow decline, and then who knows if there's going to be a second bump. So it's going to be around for a while, and I think it's going to be interesting. As you said, Celeste, when you're in the middle of history, it's really hard to see. I mean, when we were, Super Tuesday seemed like a really big story.
Yeah.
And everybody was planning on all their election stuff for the rest of the year, and now here we are. We don't really know how it's going to play out, and we don't really know what kind of conclusions the electorate's going to draw from this, but it's a transformative experience for the whole world. And I think it's actually kind of counterproductive to try to even frame the question of where are we going to be at the end of this, and what are we going to learn from this. We can only see what you can see. In fact, like I use a metaphor for parenting, that being a parent is like driving down 95 only looking in your rear view mirror. Like you have no idea what's ahead of you. You can only see what's in the rear view. But that's just true of life. You can only evaluate the moment that you're in and try to move forward with the resources that you have. So I'm trying to be supportive of the friends that I have that are, everybody kind of have a bad day, and then everybody regroups, and then somebody else has a bad day, and just try to kind of support the people that are struggling, and also be self-aware enough that when you're having a bad day, or you need to just kind of clock out and not listen to the news and go listen to Mozart for an hour or something, that's okay. That's not, letting yourself down. And
everybody is doing something digitally right now, so there's plenty of ways to plug in, to have some kind of social interaction. I agree completely.
And actually, I didn't start it. I'd love to take credit for it, but in my family, a couple of people reached out and did kind of like family Zoom calls, and these are people that we text periodically, but we haven't all been on screen with each other in a long time, and that was great, and it made me want to do more of that. Even some friends that I'm in like Facebook Messenger groups with, and we just kind of chat with each other, former colleagues and stuff, for once in a while. But we actually did like a digital happy hour last weekend, and it was hilarious. So that's great. It's like that kind of even, it's not just recreating your everyday social connections, but taking this as an opportunity to expand your reach out a little bit and spend a little bit more time with people that you wouldn't normally get to interact with. And, that's really meaningful, I think.
Yes.
One thing that I've seen up here is that obviously there's a lot of stuff being done online, and everybody now knows how to use Zoom who didn't before. But there's also some old school stuff going on. One club that I belonged to mailed things to people. They needed to vote on something, and so they mailed out personal letters and envelopes and stamps.
Wow.
They could
do that while they can until the postal service.
Post office runs out of money.
Right. One of the local Democratic committees here took it upon themselves to call everybody in their precinct, Democrats and Republicans alike, and just call and say, hello, we're the Fairfax Democrats. How are you doing? How can we help you?
Oh, wow. That's great.
And it was a tremendous success.
Yeah.
And people needed help with food and filing job claims and stuff, and they had information for them. But a lot of them were just like in the John Prine song, they were just old people who were lonely, waiting for someone to say hello in their hello. In some cases, some of the Republicans they called, nobody had talked to them for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And so if you can do something like that, or organize something like that, reaching out to your friends and your enemies, and just anybody, it could reap huge benefits in terms of bringing us all back together.
There's something else that the March for Our Lives there's a lot of really creative kids in March for Our Lives. A lot of them did, nationally, I'm not just talking about the kids that created it, that are either drama kids or talented musically or do spoken word, stuff like that. So they actually have a whole wing of the organization that's devoted to what they call artivism, where they do visual art and different kinds of stuff. And it's very easy to share that on social media. And it's amazing and creative and very inspiring stuff, but it also is a way to make a connection and feel like you're delivering content that's not just kind of, here's a link or here's a Zoom call or something, but you're actually delivering content. And they actually just came out with a couple months ago, a zine, which is like an online magazine that has original writing and original pictures and stuff in it. And that's, you can get people to contribute to that. It's a personal expression. It feels good when you're doing it. It feels good when you share it. It's a way to build a feeling of community, but it's positive. It's the expression of the art is a statement, but it's also kind of therapeutic. It's healing at the same time that it's enabling and empowering. So,
Yeah.
but and it's cheap.
Empowerment
That's
is a
awesome.
word that we toss around a lot, and this isn't, this is that opportunity for a lot of us, is to get people. Again, I talked earlier about this idea of helplessness and this sense that you're not, there's an sense of atomization, and that what you're doing doesn't matter. I think what you were just describing is wonderful, Beth. Just something that puts your energy into a concrete thing is really, really important.
And anything that you can do to build community, even in this weird way, like what we're doing right now, anything you can do to build community so that people know that they're not alone out there with whatever it is they're dealing with. That is just huge.
Yes.
A couple
Okay, go ahead.
a couple years ago, I went to a demonstration on the Mall in DC, and I was riding the Metro, and there was a woman sitting across from me who was going to the same event, and I struck up a conversation with her. And this was somebody who had been going to demonstrations on the Mall once, twice, 3 times a week, every week for months. She had all these signs for all these occasions, and she'd become kind of a figure that somebody you probably have had her at some of your events. So I was talking to her and I said, you ought to join our Indivisible group, and I was telling her about some of the things that we were doing and some of the elections and things. She had no idea any of that was going on. Any of it. Yeah. This flipping of the General Assembly, the governor's race, all this stuff.
Right.
It was like she didn't know. And she was not looked into that community. And it turned out she doesn't use Facebook. She doesn't believe in it. She's never had an account. She simply didn't know. So everything that had happened at the state level, at the local level, she didn't know.
Well, it's interesting because the experience that I've had with some of the gun violence prevention groups that we've come in contact with, there was one meeting where it was right before the march in DC. We're invited to Chicago, and we're sitting in the basement of St. Sabina's Church on the south side of Chicago, and there were, with a bunch of other kids from youth groups around Chicago who were working on gun violence. They had never been in the same room together.
Yeah.
Before that meeting.
Yep.
They were sharing their experience. The kids from the south side and the kids from the west side who were Black were talking about, well, it's really a gun violence here. I mean, handgun violence here. It's not, AR-15s are not the problem. And the kids from the Hispanic parish on the west side said, oh, we have AR-15 violence. We got a guy that drove past our church, because it's like gang stuff, drove past the church in a panel van, slid back the door of the van, and sprayed the front of the church with AR-15 bullets. And it was right when the parochial school was releasing for the day. So, and the kids from the south side and the west side from the Black communities had never heard that story. They'd never all been at the table together, because people get siloed, and that, breaking through that and building real coalitions and real connections that are based on personal connections, that's, as Scott said, that's empowering. And
it's interesting that you would say that too, because that's one of the reasons APV formed, was this idea of siloing, is that we ran into all sorts of groups and people who worked on LGBT community issues, or school prison pipeline stuff, or the environment, or all these progressive issues, things that we all believe in, but who worked beside each other and didn't know each other. It's one of the reasons we're a multinational
Yes.
organization,
Yeah.
because that's, look, if you are African American, then there's an environmental impact on you that other groups don't feel. Because you know what, if you're going to build a coal-fired power plant, or if you're going to pump sewage into the river,
Where's that going to happen?
More people,
Right, right. Well, you know what's happening in Miami? People are buying up property in Little Haiti because it doesn't flood. It's the highest point in Miami. So there's all this gentrification driving people out of Little Haiti because it's a little bit higher above sea level than some of the places lower down.
And for the future, because
yeah. Well,
yeah.
and
Adam, I feel like we keep cutting you off. What?
Yeah.
No, it's all good. No, I was gonna say about what you had said about like being in the same room. Like that's so significant. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really kind of excited for us to be doing more digital connection, because it's like it does open up more of an opportunity to where like connecting with several people who are in different parts of the country or even part of the world is going to become the new normal for a little bit. And I'm excited about that.
It's kind of like a benign version of Twitter.
Right. Yeah. And like when I think about my survivor community, right, like the community of other survivors of conversion therapy, a lot of times we are advocates in our states. We do the press conferences, we do the media interviews, we do the advocacy in front of different settings. But we don't often get in the same room to share our experiences. And some of us have even been in the same program, So it's like, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to connect more with more people across the country as survivors. So like I said, we're doing that historical When We Rise showing just a few survivors. Or I say a few, it's a private group of survivors. So I'm not sure how many are going to come, but I'm hoping it's going to be a lot. But it's a group of survivors all around the country. Yeah.
That's such a great idea. The other thing I was going to say, Adam, it resonated so much with me when you're talking about kids that are trapped in this time in a home that is not supportive. And my daughter really educated me about that when she was the president of her school's GSA. And she would tell me this stuff, and it didn't make any sense to me that the reception that some of these kids got when they told their parents it was heartbreaking, but it was also actually shocking. I was like, I could not believe that happened, which was part of my privilege that I didn't get over myself. But she did this one thing where she wanted to have a movie day at our house and show a bunch of gay and queer themed movies. And she said, when the parents are dropping the kids off, you have to pretend that this is a book club.
Oh no.
I'm like, what? I can't lie to these parents. I'm going to be liable. I'm thinking my husband's a lawyer. This is a bad idea.
Oh.
And she says, no, because they haven't come out to their parents yet. And I'm like, well, don't they know they're in GSA? Don't they come to the meetings? What do they say? And she said, no, they tell them that I'm going to a book club after school today. So we have to tell them that this is a movie day and we're watching movies of like Hunger Games, like the books that we read in book club. So what those kids need now, Adam, is like a digital book club. It's like they need to be able to tell their parents, I'm going to my room. I'm in a book club. I'm on an online book club tonight, and go into a chat room where they talk about the fact that their family is driving them crazy and they don't have anywhere to go. You can't do that physically, but there are caring people that they can connect with, like you, online, that can literally be lifesavers right now. And it's heartbreaking.
We actually, and I don't want to blast us. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, you mentioned, with just the kids that have these heartbreaking stories. We actually had, in the midst of all of this, a story that came out about someone who went to Liberty University, which, as you can imagine, would be a lot of fun if you're part of our community, and so he, man, it's been a really awesome journey watching this kid, but he's definitely grown, and the fact that he's sharing his story right now is pretty awesome, and it's like one glimpse of hope that's coming out of all of this. And I think we're going to see a lot of these glimpses of hope from several communities as everybody gets more accustomed to like social networking digitally.
Well, and there's so much overlap. Like one of the really incredible student organizers that I met last year from March for Our Lives is he's in Utah. He's in the Salt Lake City chapter, and they've actually had some tremendous success on changing some stuff in Utah. But when he goes home from college, he's the only gay young man of color in his community in Utah. And, you know, it's hard. It's hard. But he's also he's also an activist against gun violence prevention. It's like there's a lot of different facets to people. It's like we were talking about, a lot of these issues affect people in a lot of different ways, and but it affects them as a whole person. And there's a lot of different ways to connect with people. And, you know, whole people are going through this, but, you know, they're experiencing it. He's experiencing it as a young man of color, as a queer person, as a person, you know, who's home from school and is missing his friends. Like that, all those facets of people are being kind of pinged right now. And but those are all opportunities to connect with people. You know, those are all the things that people care about. Those are ways to reach out.
So this has been remarkable. This has been, I
awesome.
came on and I thought, oh, what if we get in like half an hour and everybody's just done talking? But
love it.
This was so good. I thought we'd go around, each of you, again, if you want to plug your organization. I mean, we've talked about, I think, what everybody does a lot, but if you have something you want to plug or something that's coming in the future for you guys, you know, I thought we would, you know, we'd do that. And then also, I mean, I think if it's okay, maybe if everybody enjoyed this, we'll try and do this again, you know, down the road. Sure. And because I thought this was really fruitful. And I very much appreciate it. Celeste, what's going on in your life?
Well, everybody needs money, but I think everybody who's listening right now, if you can give, go click on Scott's button and give some money to the Alliance for Progressive Virginia. I think that's money well spent. Elections do matter, and this election really does matter. And elections have consequences, and APV is going to be out there doing that stuff. So this is a golden opportunity, and every dollar goes to programming. So
yes, it does. Thank you very much. Cheers. Adam?
Sorry. I'm having a really hard time.
You missed your cue.
I know. I was on mute. So I am actually joining forces with somebody pretty awesome. Scott Price and I are going to be on an Equality Virginia Zoom lunch and learn next week, talking about bringing about the end of conversion therapy for minors in Virginia.
Awesome. That's tremendous.
We'll be posting the link in the near future. And then but also Born Perfect.
Yeah, we are at the campaign to end conversion therapy. Virginia is the 20th state to end conversion therapy for minors and the first state in the South. So it's really a pretty big deal. Born Perfect, you can find more about us at bornperfect.org.
Excellent. Beth?
That's great. I second Celeste's motion that everybody donate to APV.
It's a condition that I set before.
I did. We signed the form, Scott. It's okay. You can stop nagging. But I also want to say, if you want more information about joining Moms Demand in your community, it's a national organization, but it's based in local communities dealing with issues on a local level. It's momsdemand.org. And if you're a young person and you want to get involved in the only grassroots organization fighting gun violence that is completely run by actual students, it's marchforourlives.com, and there's a million ways to get involved while you're still in school and actually make a difference and move the needle. And I think if we all work together, we can do that.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. This is a project we've talked about for a while, and there's a certain synergy that came to us with this kind of video production, which has its limitations, obviously, but at the same time is really, really good right now. And we're gonna keep doing this as we go through the year. One good thing is that we found that, for instance, experts and activists and politicians are more available right now because they're all, wearing their pajamas and hanging out. If you can get them on the phone, you can get them on this. So looking forward to more of that. We're going to be talking to Delegate Jeff Bourne from the Richmond area about the General Assembly, which people again have kind of forgotten that it happened. But we got a lot of stuff done this year, and we're going to talk about that. And then also, obviously, we'll talk about the pandemic and how what that's going to mean for the Virginia budget next year. We are a state that balances its budget, and we are a state that is losing money right now. So what are we going to cut? What are we going to do? Will be probably a big part of that discussion, and that will be next week. So Beth, Celeste, Adam, thank you guys so much. And I hope to talk to you guys both collectively again and individually. So
anytime, Scott, it was great.
That's
Cheers.
great.
Thank you.
Meeting
Goodbye.
all of you.
Awesome.
Bye, guys.
Bye, y'all.